Welcome back. In a Democratic Party moving to the left, at least rhetorically, it could be hard to accuse John Hickenlooper of pandering. The former Colorado governor is opposed to things like Medicare for all. He's a moderate on immigration and considers himself a fiscal conservative, unlike some of his better-known 2020 opponents right now. Still, Hickenlooper is a proven vote-getter, having been elected governor of Colorado twice and mayor of Denver twice. And presidential candidate John Hickenlooper joins me now from Denver. Governor Hickenlooper, welcome back to Meet the Press, sir.
Good morning.
Let me just start. Look, I want to dive into it. People want to assess your ability to be president. We've got a front page story in the New York Times today that I'm sure you've already seen about the crisis at the border, that we have a larger debate about immigration, and I'm not asking for your larger answer on that. I'm curious, what would you be doing right now? We have a huge influx right now. They're gaming the system differently. We don't have the facilities to deal with these type of asylum seekers. What would you do right now?
Well, certainly, I wouldn't have gotten us into the situation we find ourselves at the border now, and I would not have ripped away hundreds and hundreds, thousands of kids away from their mothers and then shipped them off to adoptive families. I mean, it's a form of kidnapping. I think the key was to keep out in front of this issue and make sure we had the facilities so that we could provide, humane processing of people that were, in many cases, fearing their lives were at risk and fleeing perhaps certain death to try and come to America. This country's been built on immigration. We should respect and have a process that's fair for everyone.
What do our borders look like in a Hickenlooper administration? How tight, how secure, how porous? How would you describe it?
No, I think you need borders, but you have to recognize that we are a country built on immigration. Right now, we have more job openings than we have people looking for work. We've got to reevaluate our entire immigration system and whether we need more workers to help bring in our crops, which we're at the borderline now, where last fall we were leaving some of our fruits and vegetables in the fields and unharvested, whether we need more electrical engineers to keep our tech industry at the front of the global competition. I mean, that's all got to be incorporated into a comprehensive treatment of immigration and making sure that in the process of doing that, we solve the complexities
right
at the border.
What is an extreme moderate, right? A radical moderate. There's different versions of this. I've heard you off the record say versions of this as well. Define it for voters. How do you want that defined when we hear this phrase that you're an extreme moderate?
Well, I don't like any of the labels. I've tried to do both when I was in small business, but also when I was a mayor, when I was a governor. I've tried to address bringing people together and getting things done. And I really do believe we're in a crisis now of division. That encompasses healthcare and the environment and the economy. And what I've done again and again is been able to bring people together and get stuff done. So we got to almost universal coverage in healthcare in Colorado. We expanded Medicaid. We created one of the most innovative exchanges in the country. We got the environmental community to sit down with the oil and gas industry and actually create the first methane regulations in the country that the oil and gas industry paid $60 million to implement, but are the equivalent of taking 320,000 automobiles off the roads. I think of all the candidates so far, I think I'm the person who has the most continuous example, the most continuous record of actually getting people together and bring them together, put down your weapons, and then get things done.
But Governor, what somebody on the left would say, you're going to sit down with the oil and gas industry. That's the problem. You're going to let them write the legislation. There's been too much accommodation over the years, not just on that issue. But that is the argument coming from the new progressive left. How do you deal with that as a candidate?
Well, I hold out the record of actual accomplishment. Everyone else is pointing fingers and blaming each other. And, when we got that methane regulation put in place, that system of regulations, not only has it helped Colorado, it's now being rolled out as national policy across Canada. It should be global policy. If we're really serious about addressing the challenges of climate change and the environment, it's not sufficient just to address it here in this country. We've got to do it globally to have the impact that we have to have. I mean, this is a place where we don't have the luxury of continuing this Washington-style battle of blaming the other side.
And one of these battles where we have this a lot is on the issue of abortion. And I'm curious, when it comes to this idea of trying to basically break impasses, which I think is essentially what you're trying to say. You're going to be a guy that's going to try to break an impasse. You have a lot of states, Georgia's the latest, that are passing fetal heartbeat bills. Essentially, they're trying to prevent abortions, making them illegal the minute you can hear a heartbeat. What is your reaction to laws like that? Do you believe they're unconstitutional or not? And what is the line on abortion for you?
Well, I think those laws are unconstitutional, and I think, from my point of view, I recognize the difficulty of the question, and I empathize with people on both sides, but I believe I've always come down on the side of a woman's right to take care of her own health care.
Is there any limit? Is there any limit that you believe there should be? What is it?
Wait. But one of the things we did in Colorado, over the course of 5 years, we got some foundation money, but we provided long-acting reversible contraception, things like Norplants and IUDs, to 15 to 25-year-old young women. And in that process, over the last 8 years, we have reduced teenage pregnancy and teenage abortion by over 60%. I mean, that's that's the kind of accomplishment and achievement we should be looking at. And again, you've got to have the debate, and I respect that, but I think a woman has to ultimately have the right to make decisions about her own health.
And what is government's role at all? Should government just draw that line? Is there a line the government should draw?
I think that the Supreme Court has already drawn that line, and that in this country, women are allowed that final decision of those issues that most directly affect their health care.
Let me ask you a final issue that has popped up this morning, and that is this accusation against Vice President Biden. He says he doesn't remember it, but he also says that he wants to rethink how men in general have interacted with women. First of all, is it a disqualifying, from what you have read and seen about this, do you believe it's disqualifying? And second, what past behavior should be accountable these days and what shouldn't?
Well, I think the more important issue to recognize is that we are at an inflection point, really a moment of transformation of the entire country, where women, in many cases for the first time, are having the courage to come forward and speak about things that happen to them that make them intensely uncomfortable. In many cases, they feel they've been damaged unfairly. I think our first responsibility is to make sure that we allow these ones, we recognize their bravery, and that we listen to them and we believe them, right? We have to make sure that that's the first issue.
And what about, is this disqualifying for Vice President Biden?
Well, again, I don't know, aside from this one issue, I haven't, even this issue, I don't know all the details, but I think that's why we have an election. That's that process. But certainly it's very disconcerting, and I think that, again, women have to be heard, and we should start by believing them.
Governor John Hickenlooper, Democrat from Colorado. I'm going to have to leave it there. Thanks for coming on and sharing your views. I imagine we'll catch up again, sir.
Thanks, Chuck.
Hey, NBC News fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down here, and then click on any of the videos over here to watch the latest interviews, show highlights, and digital exclusives. Thanks for watching.